Have you ever secretly wished for something terrible to happen, and then it actually did? Well, let's dive right into this explainer and set the scene. Imagine a plain, dark, timbered monastery guest house. Outside, the snow is literally erasing the roads. Inside, a family is huddled together in those heavy, quiet hours just before dawn. It's the eve of a condemned brother being dragged away to prison. But here's the thing, there is no judge here, no jury, no lawyers. It's just a family trying to untangle the messy truth from a legal verdict that was handed down only hours earlier. We're stepping into a brilliant imaginary conversation drawn from Fyodor Dostoevsky's masterpiece, where the real subject isn't just a basic murder mystery, it's the terrifying weight of moral responsibility.
Now, this part is absolutely crucial. Dmitri's desperate plea completely shatters the silence of the room. A court has just wrongfully convicted him of murdering his father, Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov. I mean, the whole town believes it. The witnesses testified to it. But Dmitri, he turns to his family and demands real honesty. He knows he didn't strike the fatal blow, but he wants to know why they're all sitting there in this thick, unspoken tension, basically pretending the court's verdict is the whole story. He is demanding that they stop hiding behind polite silence.
So, what does this all mean for us? It brings us to the ultimate question we're unpacking today. The court answered a very simple, almost mechanical question. Who held the weapon? But this family is actively challenging that simple legal verdict against an incredibly messy web of moral responsibility. Think about it. Does guilt belong solely to the person who performs the physical act? Or can guilt spread, like an infection through desire, silence, neglect, resentment, and even ideas? Can you be entirely innocent in the eyes of the law, but completely guilty in your own conscience?
This beautifully illustrates the rapid-fire contrast we're going to see throughout our time together. We are completely separating what people physically did from the dark intentions they harbored inside. The person who actually lifted the weapon and struck the blow? Sure, they're legally guilty. But what if you wanted the victim dead? What if you turned a blind eye? What if you actively manipulated the people involved just for your own amusement? As we're about to see, every single person in this room contributed a piece of the puzzle that made the murder absolutely inevitable.
In any normal murder mystery, finding the killer closes the case, right? Well, not here. The true killer is already dead. Smerdyakov is gone, represented by an eerily empty chair sitting squarely in the middle of the room. No one placed it there, and honestly, no one asks for it to be removed. It acts like this ghost of memory. It just sits there, forcing everyone to look at it and confess their part in the crime. It perfectly represents the space where an idea sat before it became a violent physical act.
As this moral autopsy really gets going, the family members start looking inward. Katerina, Dmitri's former fiancée, is the first to really crack open the truth. She admits that she gave the court a damning, drunken letter written by Dmitri. But get this, she didn't do it for justice. Actually, she admits she did it out of wounded pride. She wanted Dmitri punished for humiliating her. She took fragments of his rage, combined them with fragments of her own humiliation, and essentially built a murderer for the court. It is a terrifying reminder of how easily we can twist our own pain into someone else's punishment.
Then, we have Grushenka, the woman both Dmitri and his father fiercely desired. She fully acknowledges her own portion of guilt. She didn't hold the weapon either, but she admits that she purposefully drew the father and son into a filthy, jealous rivalry. And why? Literally just for her own amusement. She took pleasure in making men suffer for desiring her. She recognizes that by weaponizing their jealousy, she helps set the stage for the blood that was eventually spilled. She sees how her pride turned the people around her into highly volatile weapons.
And then there's Ivan, the intellectual philosopher of the family. His standalone admission is just absolutely devastating. He confesses that he suspected Smerdyakov would act. He suspected the murder was coming. Smerdyakov essentially asked him for permission in a coded conversation, and Ivan's response? He simply left town. He purposefully left at the most useful moment so his hands would remain clean. He actually thought that absence would equal innocence. But in this room, he finally admits the chilling truth. He left his father to die.
But Ivan's guilt goes way deeper than just not being there. He realizes that his grand philosophical ideas actually laid the groundwork for the murder. Ivan preached this idea that without God, everything is permitted. He treated his philosophy like some clean, harmless debate club exercise. But spoiler alert, desperate men don't treat ideas as exercises. They treat them as permissions. Ivan gave Smerdyakov the intellectual universe needed to justify the atrocity, completely failing to take responsibility for how those ideas would be weaponized inside the mind of a bitter, humiliated servant.
And what about Dmitri, the guy actually convicted of the crime? Dmitri confesses that upon hearing of his father's violent death, his very first emotion wasn't horror. No, it was relief. One shameful, intimate breath where he realized his father could no longer taunt him or hold money over him or stand in his way. He might not have committed the physical act, and he did stop himself just short of doing it, but Dmitri realizes he had made a home for murder inside himself. He had cultivated the hatred so deeply that the act itself was just a formality, completed by someone else.
Even Alyosha. You'd think the pure, loving, spiritual brother is in the clear, right? Nope. He realizes his own deep guilt, too. Alyosha didn't hate anyone, but he confesses that he just did too little. He saw Dmitri's rage. He saw Ivan's despair. He saw Smerdyakov's contempt and avoided him because it made him uneasy. Alyosha realizes that he saw the whole house burning, but he mistook his quiet affection and passive listening for actual sufficient action. He thought loving everyone separately was enough, completely failing to see how all their individual wounds were joining together into a fatal disaster. To really grasp the whole shebang, we have to look at the victim himself, Fyodor Pavlovich. He was basically the architect of a masterclass in psychological abuse. He turned his home into a toxic battleground. He treated people as mere appetites with names. He trained his sons to expect betrayal at every single turn. He divided humanity into masters and objects, turning affection into a bitter, ruthless competition and making other people shame his personal entertainment. He was murdered, yes, but he spent years pouring the poison that eventually killed him.
With the stage perfectly set by a cruel father, Smerdyakov, the actual killer, didn't really need to invent anything new. He simply observed. He sat back and looked at everyone's hatred, Katerina and Grushenka's pride, Ivan's godless philosophy, and Alyosha's passivity. He saw the entire mechanism of the family's dysfunction and he weaponized it. He chose the hour, struck the blow, and let the suspicion fall perfectly onto Dmitri. He orchestrated the physical murder using the emotional weapons the family practically handed right to him.
So you can see how this exposes a massive, terrifying disconnect between the law and morality. The court asked the absolute easiest question, who held the weapon? But the truth revealed in this guest house exposes a horrifying mountain of shared moral guilt. The law needs a single scapegoat, for sure, but morality? Morality demands that every single person in that room answer for the environment, the ideas, the neglect, and the malice that made the murder a reality. In a very real way, they all killed Fyodor Karamazov.
As this family accepts their portions of the blame, the conversation doesn't just stop at the murder. It rapidly escalates into even deeper, more terrifying philosophical territory. By acknowledging that an idea can be just as guilty as a knife, Ivan pushes the family to ask the big ones. If morality doesn't come from the law, where does it come from? Can it survive without God? And if there is a God, why do innocent children suffer in this world?
Because this explainer is only focused on topic 1 and really just scratches the surface of the murder itself, you absolutely must explore the rest of this incredible journey. To see Ivan's challenge to faith, how Alyosha responds to the suffering of children, and whether humanity can even handle the burden of true freedom, you can read the rest by visiting https://imaginarytalks.com/The Brothers Karamazov explained through its characters. It is a phenomenal read that dives right into the very core of human existence.
I'm going to leave you with this final haunting thought to ponder before you go explore the rest of this masterpiece. As these characters realize that their past guilt is permanent, the question becomes, what now? If love and realization cannot magically erase the terrible things we've done or the guilt we share, can it at least prevent our past from dictating every single action we take in the future? Can we carry our guilt and still choose to walk a different path? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the truth behind the verdict.